100 West is an artist residency in Corsicana, Texas, ran by Kyle Hobrach, and it's about an hour south of Dallas in a little town in this amazing historic building that used to be an Oddfellows clubhouse. It's been meticulously restored and preserved. Every inch of it is just gorgeous. The studio is massive with insane light coming in. There's a wood shop that is also just filled with all of my dream tools and equipment, and I was basically just a kid in a candy shop the whole time I was there. My schedule was basically wake up in the studio, make some work, get some food, make some more work, go to sleep, and wake up and do it all over again, which is my ideal situation. If you're in Dallas or in the area, I highly recommend you check it out. There's artists cycling through every year, and they're always having open studios and artist talks and things of that nature. So highly recommend you show them some love and give them some support. My standard studio time, just normal situation, is really fragmented by my teaching schedule. So it's more difficult to get in a rhythm, which of course at 100 West, all I was doing was working in the studio. And then just the size of my studio, the lack of ventilation, if you will, is not necessarily that conducive to the amount of wood cutting and spray painting that I do with my work. So in my normal studio in Dallas, it's a little bit more chopped up, spread out. It takes me a week or several weeks to finish a single painting, whereas at 100 West I was surrounded by everything that I needed. I had all the size I could ask for, and it's all I was focused on for the entire month, waking up in the studio and getting to work, and it just really facilitated this intense focus, and I made more work in that 1 month while I was there than I had made in the previous 6 months at my studio in Dallas. And I came in not really knowing what I was going to be working on. I came in with this new thing that I was trying and had to work through, and having all of that time and space and just allowed me to work through paintings quickly without having to really struggle as hard as I would have if each painting was taking me 2 or 3 weeks to finish. While I was there, if I made a bad painting, it was like, okay, well, I'll wake up tomorrow and I'll try to make a good one. And it's really great to be able to have a situation like that where you can just work through things a lot quicker. Spray paint has always been part of the work. Well, not always. It's been part of the work for a long time. But my work is basically plywood that's drawn on and chopped up into a bunch of shapes and then painted and reassembled. That's essentially the formula of them. And the painting process over time was meticulous with a brush and acrylic or whatever, brushed on, and over time it was just like I needed something that was faster, more direct, dried quickly, and I sort of adopted spray paint as part of that solution. And so I've used spray paint for a while, but it was always just in this like getting a flat, quick layer of paint on the surface. The new thing that happened at 100 West right before I went to 100 West was sort of just by total freak accident, just spray painting a piece of scrap wood and seeing it sit in the corner of my studio for a while and seeing this gradient that I had inadvertently created and slowly falling in love with it and seeing the merit of that soft edge up against the hard chopped edge of the plywood, and I realized it was something that I just had to embrace. And I think that soft gradient is a lot like impasto brush marks or drips. It's one of those painting tropes that's really easy to fall in love with. They're just really seductive. And those are it's one of the things that I kind of resist in my own work, but I feel like since I just sort of organically stumbled upon it and that it more or less found me, that it was something that I allowed myself to adopt and start to play with. Once I started to actually use the gradient, use the soft edge of the spray paint, I realized how different it was forcing me to respond to my paintings, because I'm typically extremely obsessive and do a lot of drawing in the sketchbook before I ever start drawing on plywood, before I ever start doing any cutting or assembling, which you may not recognize from the paintings themselves, because they are just kind of wonky and clunky and look haphazard, but they're pretty calculated and planned. And the spray paint was something that I don't know how to make that mark in my sketchbook with a pencil, and so it was something that I couldn't really plan for when I was making the paintings. I just put some color down and see what happened and responded to it and made another mark and made another mark. If I hated it, then I painted over it. It was just this really sort of instinctual, intuitive thing that happened, which is very counter to how I usually think about things. So in that sense, there was a new aspect of the work that was really terrifying to me and really liberating at the same time, and it really sped up the work. And I think that speed shift is probably the most important factor, is having the fast decision making and then the slow decision making coming afterwards, instead of it being the same slow thought process and calculated marks with this sort of slow and meticulous construction that comes afterwards. I like having that speed element, that fast and uncontrolled, unknowing aspect of the work that comes in as a counterpoint to that slower type of mark. I think a little bit of that goes back to the speed shift. It's something that I always think about, are these interesting juxtapositions within the work. Having a grid-like structure, but everything just sort of like doesn't quite fit. Everything sort of like works against that a little bit. And it makes it feel slightly uncomfortable, like there's a sense of gravity, but it doesn't quite make sense. And it's like, I know that you know, and I'm just kind of like poking you a little bit with it. And I like that sense of humor, and I like that sort of gamesmanship in the work. But I've never been in love with my own mark. I've never been in love with my own gesture. I see, other artists all the time that just, do the thing really quickly, and it's this beautiful poetic moment. And I can't do that myself. And I feel like I always have to have a counterpoint to that type of mark that elevates it. So there has to be some level of skill or craft or labor involved that elevates that other thing. So I think in terms of having detailed craftsmanship as a counterpoint to wobbly immediacy is just one of the ways that I think about constructing the paintings and holding everything together and keeping it interesting. Just as much as the spray paint coming in as this nice fast decision making versus the slow and calculated decision making, that good and bad craft sort of playing off of each other, I think is a really important part of the work. I don't have immediate access to this painting, but we could probably flash a picture up on screen with the magic of video editing. But I would say the breakthrough moment came with the first painting, where I realized that the gradients were like this thing that I myself could personally use. And that was with that scrap piece of wood. The reason I had this scrap piece of wood that I felt like was just something that I could test a can of spray paint on was because I had started this painting, I had my shape, I was feeling good, feeling right, and I had painted it this blue color. And blue is a color that I have a really hard time using, and so I like to sort of force myself into it, and I just hated it, decided it was the worst color ever. I put it to the side, and it became a scrap piece for me to test spray paint on. And that's this painting where I was like, wow, that edge, that color against this other color looks really great. I'm gonna mess around and make this into a painting. And so I grabbed some other block of wood that had some paint that was mixed on it from earlier, and cut that shape out and inserted that into the painting. I was like, well, if I can use a gradient, I can use a drip too, and try to drip, and did just sort of allowed myself to do these things that felt really off limits for myself. And so I think that painting was really a big game changer for me, and how I moved forward with the work that came afterwards. Yeah, the paintings that I had been making before this current body of work, um, they over the year or two before had felt like they were sort of moving in this direction that felt like they were more and more related to my drawing practice. Like, the closer I could get a painting to feel like the thing that I had drawn in my sketchbook, the better I was feeling about the painting. And so that sort of uh, you know wobbly line that was slightly off kilter was really important. The sort of architectural schematic aspect of the paintings became really important. But once I had the gradient come into play, and I had this thing that I couldn't really plan for anymore come in, I the line work, or the drawing, wasn't the thing that was on the front of my mind anymore. It was this gradient and this edge and this color, and how do I respond to that new shape and that new edge. And afterwards, going back and then drawing on top of, I'd take a picture of my gradients and my blobs and my shapes that I had made with the spray paint, and I'd draw on top of it, just like on my phone, and figure out how those shapes were gonna respond. So the drawing became this sort of like secondary feature to the gradients, and the space relationship was a lot different. When it was just the lines, the sort of more meticulously planned type of stuff that I was doing, I was thinking a lot of in terms of this like sort of two-dimensional gravity, where there was weight at the bottom of the painting, and you could feel things that sort of were like shifting, or like they were just about to fall, or like there was lines that were holding each other up in this really two-dimensional space. But once I had that soft edge, it was all of a sudden this atmospheric space, and I had completely different relationships working. And I think just the newness of that really wanted me to showcase the soft edge and the atmospheric quality of it. And so that's the thing that I gravitated towards the most, while I was at 100 West. So I've had a little bit of time since the residency, and I've had time to take a little break and think about the work. There was so much work made at the residency while I was there, so quickly, that I wasn't really taking that time to stop and analyze. I was sort of saving that for after, when I didn't have that studio workspace anymore. And so that's what I was doing for a little bit after the residency. And it gave me time to evaluate what I thought was working and not working, and what was bad, and what are the things that I can pluck from here that are worth holding on to. And so I'm sort of in that phase right now where I'm just starting to make more paintings since then, and that clunky drawing, that two-dimensional sense of gravity, that sort of calculated sketchbook work that I normally do is sort of forefronted itself again, whereas this atmospheric gradient thing is still playing a critical role. It just doesn't feel as reliant on those types of marks anymore. So some of the romance and love affair with that spray painted gesture is over a bit. I'm a little bit more level-headed about it, I think. And I think that's probably good for the work, because it's letting me be a little bit more analytic about it, and a little more clever, I would say. I think the work at 100 West is almost this like intuitive, romantic body of work where I was just like following my heart and following my instinct, and trying to make clever decisions along the way, but not really stopping to really overthink it. And now I'm sort of back in my home turf, and going through my normal structure, where there's a lot of drawing involved. And it's definitely different, but I feel like it's letting me make some more interesting relationships between hard and soft, fast and slow, clunky and calculated, good and bad craft. And it's all those juxtapositions and relationships that I think are really interesting in the work. Just coming at it from a different place. So I'm excited about the work that I'm making now, excited about the work that's coming up for you guys in a few months, and so we'll see what happens.